You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network. This is the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of Thunderquack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's Thunderquack time!
Hello and welcome back to the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of thunderquack.com, which you can get early every other Tuesday over where? At Patreon, I guess? Yeah, patreon.com/thunderquack, just like our Patreon producers, Brian Morawski and JJ Samuel do. Or you can wait and get it late every other Friday on podcast services across the galaxy. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Cohen.
And I'm your other host, Amanda Conkin.
Yeah, I think we're just gonna go right into it. I don't have anything else to talk about. We just talked for like almost an hour though. In the uncut thing. Sorry guys.
For the uncut stuff.
You got paid to play this week. But
it's always like the second people the behind the curtains that if you don't get the uncut version, you don't realize that the proper podcast is actually the second part of the podcast. And we always do a first part of the podcast that comes out last. It's a very confusing format, but it works for us. So
well, the way that you just said it is very confusing.
It is.
What we do is not confusing. It's just you said it in the most confusing way I think a person could possibly say that.
Intentionally, because I think it keeps it interesting. I don't know.
I don't know if I agree with that sentiment. It sounds like you've been watching too many Matrix movies.
What?
I'm just gonna say it.
To talk about the Matrix.
I think that people are wrong about these sequels, and I will also go as far as to say that if you don't like the third movie, it's because you don't understand the point of the Matrix movies.
Okay, so let's just start off on a controversial note then. So We've now gone through the three movies, and I think it's one of these hindsight things that I was watching you have an exchange on Twitter with somebody about the idea that we have now rewatched these movies with the idea of going into the new movie that's coming out for the Matrix, and sort of how these other movies hold up. And I don't think that they necessarily are better by like having a fourth one that comes out. I do think that the third movie was so wholly forgettable for me that it took until Neo was blinded for me to be like, oh, I think I've seen this movie before. Mm-hmm. Like it literally, and I was like, oh yeah, I have recollections of him walking with a bandana over his eyes and stuff. Like it just was so wholly forgettable in my brain, which is, I don't know, I forget a lot of stuff. I realize that, but still, like this movie, like usually I am really good at remembering media, and I rewatch media, and then I'm like, oh, this was so great. But what you were doing, you were talking to somebody and they were saying that the second movie was really good. And I agree. The last podcast we talked about, the second movie was quite good. We had a lot of fun watching that movie. I do remember that movie. The action scenes were really awesome. It was a great time, but it needed to stick the landing with the third one. And I just don't think it did. Like it lost everything that I loved about the first two movies, and even the through line with the love story. Cause that's the kick that you're on, I think. Which you're onto something obviously with the movies of being about like that love through line and like this epic tale and all of that stuff. But I don't see that in this one as much either. Like this one really just was also the way that the movies had set themselves up, because it didn't take place in the Matrix at all. Basically, I don't know. It just was so disjointed for me, and I also don't get it. And I'm happy for you to talk me through it.
For sure.
What the heck? Like
I don't disagree with like I don't disagree with the sentiment that these movies are not the movies that we were promised for both 2 and 3. 3 more so than 2. Um,
I think
I
2 definitely
understand
delivers. I loved it. I
I
loved 2.
understand why people are upset with them. 2, as we said last week, comes back and forgets what made the first one great with the action
Yeah.
sequences and just gives us a bunch of CG that really lacks the heart of what the first one had. The third one doesn't have that problem because the third one really doesn't have very many fight sequences. It has a
Yeah.
lot of action, but the action is much more sci-fi and a lot less kung fu. The first movie, the original movie, is mostly a martial arts movie that happens to have, like, it's the beginning of the whole gun fu movement, right? That we get with other
Mhm.
movies later on, Underworld and oh man, what's the Ethan Hawke one? Equilibrium. There's a bunch of
I
them, right?
Equilibrium. Okay, but yeah.
That starts to bring in that idea of the, like, oh, you've got 2 guns in your hands and you're also doing karate. I'm being reductive, but I
No, really?
there's a fair bit more of that in the second one, and we kind of actually ditch the guns for the most part, and we go just straight kung fu with a lot of the fighting. Um, but other than the Seraph Neo fight, which is very short, they're all very, like, enhanced by CG, right? Which
Mhm.
actually, I guess that's not true. The fight in the Merovingians mansion is an all timer. Like,
The
that is a
oh,
fantastic fight sequence.
but it was a throw. Okay, so again, agree to disagree. Literally, there was one part in the movie where I hit the
Yeah,
little, like, I was watching. I was terrible, but I watched this movie in pieces over the course of the weekend, and at one point, I was watching stuff on my phone, and it was the one time that I hit
I'm
that
still
like
I'm
10
still
second skip button.
I'm still talking about the second movie right now. I'm not talking about the third
Oh,
movie.
are you? Oh, the Merovingian.
Yeah,
Okay, because I'm like
yeah. I'm
when they were
talking. I'm
going into
talking
the
of
club, that was
the
worse.
yeah.
No, no, no. The one, yes, I agree. In the second movie was really
Yeah.
awesome. The one where it's they're fighting with the swords and all of the people. Okay, yeah, yeah.
There's
Sorry, I
no
thought we were talking about the
good.
second movie.
There's no good kung fu sequence in the Matrix Revolutions.
Yeah, no,
That that said, I and there are kung fu sequences. What you're talking about when they go into the Merovingians nightclub in this movie and in Revolutions, it's awful. It's not good. They tried to do something cool with the guys sticking to the ceiling and, like, reversing gravity and stuff like that, but they didn't
yeah, but
they didn't
it
nail it.
didn't really work.
I
Yeah,
really like the moment when Trinity kicks the guy, like, through the concrete basically, and, like, and it just,
that's all right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
goes full
It's
anime,
cool.
right? And he, like, it splinters every, like the big cracks and stuff.
Yeah,
I like that. It got a chuckle out of me, which I think is actually the intent. I this is where I think the expectation versus reality for a lot of people starts to break it down, is that um the first movie did such a good job of selling the reality of the world that when you come back in the second and the third one and the reality of the world is broken because Neo is the one, and because, like, the further down that rabbit hole we get and the more we start to understand as an audience that the construct is a construct and that there are no rules, I think the Wachowskis did a really good job of just, like, pushing that further and further, which I think is why we spend less and less time in the Matrix as the movies go on. Because at a certain point, when we get to the end of this movie, the battle between Neo and Smith, it's like, I think that people miss the forest for the trees. The fight is
yeah.
supposed to be stupid. That's the whole point.
Okay.
I think that we're actually supposed to watch that fight and see the massive scale of it and go, by the end of it, what is the point of this? Which, maybe that's not the best way to tell a story. I'm not going to argue that. I think that that's a matter of
But they
taste.
do
I
very
think
much say that in the
Yeah, I
fight,
think for me it's
right? When
like,
he's like, "Why?"
in terms of what this story is trying to do by the end of it, and Neo's journey and the path that he's on, I think that it illustrates perfectly how Agent Smith doesn't understand what Neo understands, which is why Neo is able to prevail in the way that he does, right? They have the same power. They are exactly matched, and that's why that battle is I think it lacks the release that people wanted it to be. And I think they tried to make the sequence before that with the attack on Zion. I think they tried to make that the sequence that where like we get the oh my god, Neo saved everybody. The problem is that like the end of that doesn't pop the way that they want it to. It's almost like up until that moment, like that moment and everybody cheering in the cave on Zion in the temple, right? Is
Mhm.
supposed to be the like we did it celebration. The Ewoks are singing and there's fireworks all over the
Yeah.
galaxy, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't pop that way that it's supposed to, and I totally understand people's feelings on like not getting that. And then I think like the what happens with Neo after that moment is meant to be almost like an epilogue of like or like a twist ending of like actually that's not the threat, right? The like Neo could have dealt with the machines. Like this inevitability was always there of like the only path forward was for the humans and the machines to eventually broker peace, right? The
So,
unfortunate truth
well,
of that is that Smith has to become this virus and take over the Matrix entirely, which, like, I get it. They don't sell a lot of this stuff in the movie, and you really, really have to be reading between the lines. And most people don't want to do that in a Matrix sequel. They wanted it to be fed to them in the way that it was in the first one. But we
no, but
rush
even
through so much of the story in the third one. It's so much of it is like a line, and then we're gone, and then we're on to the next thing that they
yeah,
never actually stop and talk about the fact that when Neo goes back into the Matrix, they never fully say this, but it is absolutely the like a fact in this movie. When he goes back into the Matrix, there's no one left. It is only Smith. He's the only one in
yeah,
there.
it's only Smith.
He's
Yeah,
assimilated the
yeah,
entire Matrix, right?
yes,
Because when they
yeah, we
all
get
are
that. We get
destroyed, we see it light up the
that. Yeah,
whole thing, right? Um,
yeah. But
I
you get,
like they woof some of this stuff. Like they absolutely miss some of this stuff in the storytelling. That said,
but
like
they don't talk about it. Like the stakes are not talked about.
sure,
Like it's they mention it once, being like,
yep,
"Oh, something's going on in the Matrix." Like,
yeah,
but sorry, finish your point, and then I have a different question to just
sure,
talk about that. Even it's not even read between the lines; it's just basic
yeah.
storytelling narration.
So then, like, I mean, like the stakes are that if Smith gets into the if he gets to the source, then it's all over for everyone because Smith's whole thing is like I'm just gonna end it all. Like the like
Hmm.
because they
Okay.
both it's this is why I like it. This is why I like it because Neo and Smith want the same thing. They both want peace, right? They have different ideologies to get there. They are and karma comes into the conversation in this one. Purpose, balance. We've been doing Taoist stuff in the other two movies. All of a sudden, we start to bring in I like other Eastern influences and stuff like that. Stuff that I'm not as well versed in, so I can't talk about it too much. But I understand what they're going for with the karma stuff of like and they talk about it. And I love it when the Oracle talks about like what is he? He's your other half. He's your perfect balance. It's the equation trying to like she talks about it like they talk about the architect
Yeah.
first. The architect all he needs to balance the equation. It's his whole thing. He's got to do it. And he built the Matrix. So when Neo became the one because the architect built the Matrix responded in kind, right? And that's where
Right.
Smith came from. And I love that. And I don't think that the movie does too much tell and not enough show of that because we avoid Smith for so much of it. And I think a part of that is the technology of like we don't want to like do the thing
Have so many
of
of
like
them.
a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
million of Hugo Weaving, right? We want to avoid that, and so we're gonna just tell you a bunch of stuff instead of showing you, which sucks. But there are mistakes in this movie. I don't disagree with that. But I still don't think that they're bad movies. And I certainly, like as I said on Twitter, I don't think that it's a bad story. I actually think that it's a very intelligent, very good story. And right now, we're just talking about the broader scope epic stuff, right? Of the
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the war for freedom and stuff like that and choice. I think it was a massive mistake to have the Zion stuff in the second half of part 2, because that's really what it is. Reloaded and Revolutions are one story. That it's not, neither one is a complete story. Neither one is a
Yeah.
complete movie. They are part 1 and part 2 of the middle chapter of this story. That's why I look at it and I go, we're getting the fourth movie, which is actually it. This is
Actually.
actually going to complete the trilogy.
Right.
Or I don't know if we're gonna end on a place of like, now we can go into a new world, but like a new world of storytelling, or if it's gonna actually bring closure to stuff. But
But I
um
would like that, and I like what you're talking about with that. Like, if you do look at it that way, I
yeah,
do want to
I'm
go back to
go ahead.
it. Just let's go back to though the moment that you're talking about the like, hey, we won, like what that's supposed to be. The
Yeah,
problem for me is that like structurally in the story, I expected the little kid or whatever kid, like the 16-year-old or whatever the boy is, right? I
his
expected him
name
to
is the
like
kid.
die or
He's the
get
kid. But
is he? Oh, he is.
yeah,
Okay. I expected him to like get shot or die or something because that moment isn't actually a conclusion. Like it happens before the actual conclusion of the
yeah.
movie, which the beat plays off for me. Like it
So
doesn't hit
okay,
where I'm kind of like it's like transitory. I don't
so
know.
here's the thing
It's
with
really
that
jarring.
character.
Hmm.
So one of the problems with these two movies is that they don't stand on their own. They require the animatrix and they also require Enter the Matrix in order
Ooh, okay.
to get the full story, which is like they went too far and too fast with this stuff of and they didn't learn the lessons of Star Wars. And obviously they were in the midst of it, like we were right in the middle of the prequels when they were making these movies, and so there's a lot to be learned from the way that the prequels were executed, and the expectation of how much work the audience is going to do in order to fill in the gaps in a story, right? uh
Right.
the Wachowskis, they went full on Star Wars, George Lucas, let's build a universe after the first movie was such a big deal. And they made the movie, they made the like these two movies, they made the Animatrix, they made Enter the Matrix all at the same time. There are live action sequences in Enter the Matrix, right? That are
Oh.
actually very important for the story in order for us to know who Niobe and Ghost are. Ghost gets nothing in the movies, but
Right.
he's the central character in Enter the Matrix, and
Yeah.
he's actually
Yeah.
quite important to the overall thing. The kid is actually so this is where everything falls apart because of the way that these two movies were received.
Mhm.
The kid is set up in the Animatrix, and I think that they miscast him in the movie, and that's the problem. Is that like his live action counterpart doesn't match up with his Animatrix counterpart? The kid in the Animatrix is kind of, he's a little bit goofy because he's a teenager, but there's also like a bit of a there's a little bit more to him. He's meant to be a foil for Neo,
Oh.
and and we don't really
Don't get
get
that at
that
all.
in this, right? Because they just
Don't get
play
that
him
at
off as a
all.
nuisance in the second movie, and then all of a sudden he's elevated to hero status in the third movie. And I believe that there was that look, it's taken them 20 years to get back to it because 2 and 3 did not go over well. But I think
Right.
that they had 2 and 3, and then they knew what was going to happen next. That like that this, because the way that this movie ends is not an ending. It's not even like Return of the Jedi ends on like the tableau of like, hey, we did it. We saved the galaxy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
an ending. That is an ending. Um this movie ends on, do you think we'll ever see Neo again? And then the Oracle goes, yeah, I think we will. And you're like,
Right. Yeah.
what does that mean? And that's how like that's literally how the movie ends. There's nothing like, it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, I think we will. Cut to credits, right?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
that's not an
Yeah.
ending. That's the promise of more story. And that's where I go like, oh, thank God we're gonna get Resurrections because it's going to fulfill that unanswered question at the end of Revolutions, right? It's like, oh, yeah, I think we will. What do you mean? I think that originally that was, do you think we'll see Neo again? In the cosmic sense, yeah, I think we will, because the Matrix was just rebooted, right? Like that
Right.
moment at the end is not, oh, we saved version 6 of the Matrix. Everybody that was in version 6 of the Matrix is dead. Like, let's be super clear.
Right.
All of those humans
Yeah.
died, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Smith took them over and then was obliterated. And the only ones
Right.
that seem to have survived it were the programs, and not the, because we don't see any humans at the end of that movie. We
Oh,
only
right. Yeah,
see,
yeah, yeah.
we see that the
Just the
Oracle and
program.
Sati and the Architect are still around, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's the implication with the dawn of the new sun, like that Sati is the new Oracle, right? Like that's the point there, is that Sati is the new Oracle. It's
But I
also the
see
thing that the
that
Merovingian says.
I thought that that's what it was going to be, but then the Oracle is also still there, which is why
Yeah,
I was confused.
and the Architect is also still there, right? But are they, but they're no longer active participants, is my read of
I
it.
guess.
Is that, like, maybe they're
Okay.
still
Okay.
there, they're gonna go away, they're gonna walk off into the sunset. um
Okay.
because there's a new Oracle and a new Architect. And my theory for the new movie is that Neo is the new Architect, but he doesn't know that he's the Architect, and that's the way to build a Matrix that's um
Right. Is that and that's the machines carrying him off, like the blinded version of
yeah,
Neo or whatever. They is
yeah,
still like
is
a,
they went and
a
they plugged him
mission
into something to be the Architect,
to,
and that's what we're
to
going
be
to
the
find
architect
out.
and to create
Yeah,
it. Right.
he's not
Okay.
dead at the
Interesting.
end, right? And if he's the Architect, what's the first thing that he's going to do? He's going to bring back Trinity, right?
Right. Yeah.
um
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think that the idea there was supposed to be that, like, that Keanu Reeves is the new Architect, which is what we would have discovered in the next movie that we didn't get, and that Sati is the new Oracle, and that the kid is actually the new Neo. He's the one. That at some point he
Oh.
would come in, and that there would be some other threat to this new version of the Matrix, that because this new version of the Matrix, again, this is stuff that's, like, not explicitly said, but it is definitely implied, like when the Architect comes out and he's like, they're having the conversation with the Oracle, and she's like, what about the ones that want to be free? And the Architect is like, well, obviously they'll be allowed to go. And she's like, do I have your word?
Yeah.
What do you think I am, a human, right? Like, which I actually really
Yeah.
like. I think
Yeah.
that's a really great moment. The implication there
Yeah.
is that this new version of the Matrix is a choice. If you don't want to
Right.
be in the Matrix, you can go be in the real world, quote
Right.
unquote real
Yeah.
world. We'll get to that. And I think also, if you want to come and go from the Matrix, you can do that as well. Now we open ourselves up to other threats to the Matrix, right? Because now we have this tenuous piece. How long is it going to last? How long could it last? As long as it can, right? Like, what's going to be the threat to that piece, and who's going to be in this iteration 7 of the Matrix? Who is the one, right? And I think, like, if you watch that Animatrix, you don't have to watch all of the Animatrix. If you just watch the one that's about the kid, you'll get the sense that there's a deeper connection between him and Neo, and that maybe he has the same gift, in the same way that all those other kids in the Oracle's apartment in the first movie, the kid, there is no spoon kid, right? They were all potential candidates for
Ones.
being the
Right.
one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So the kid is another one who could be the one. That's implied by that Animatrix episode. So
Okay.
I think that was meant. That's where we were meant to go. Is that he's actually supposed to be more important. I think they just cast an annoying guy. Like, I just think, like, they cast a wormy, annoying dude. And I think that they thought, oh yeah,
He's not,
he's
no.
like, it's gonna come from this unexpected place. And then it was like everybody was just like, I hate that guy. And I think
Yeah.
that they went like,
He's
okay, I
no,
guess
he's
we're not gonna
fine.
do that
I
next
just
part of the
didn't
story.
get the thing is that for me, I read him completely differently having not had the
Mhm.
Animatrix part of it, in that
Yeah, it's
it's
a
the
failing
idea
of the
of like
story for
what
sure.
well, yeah, but what people that can be inspired to do, right? And that it's
Yeah.
like it's just some kid that then believes enough in heroicism that he can take up a thing and go for it, right? Where it wasn't I
Mhm.
didn't need to know the other stuff about the one because that's lore building that I just don't think was there from the
Yeah.
like it's like a weird thing that if you sort of take it as a war movie, it sort of works in these weird ways. I don't know. Like there is some really I will say that the two badass women that shoot down the like driller thing are pretty
Yeah.
cool. And yeah, I don't know, but it just is weird. I also I am upset by the conceit that the machine needed to make a face to talk to Neo. That bothers me. Like we're world building and we can't imagine that like machines can communicate in ways other than like with eyes, a nose, and a mouth. I don't know. It also just looked like a baby face. Like it was weird. It looked like freaking the
Yeah, it was weird.
Teletubby son. Like it was like a metallic version of the Teletubby son. I don't know. But that's I mean, I, I like the again. There's a reason why we're watching these ones before the fourth one comes out because if you think about it that way, if you structure these two movies together as a middle chapter in a tale that's about to come to fruition, sure, I could get on board for that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think in terms of the way that these movies were executed back in 2003, I
Hmm.
it was a misstep to go to the ending so quickly. I think I don't know. I can't get in their heads. I don't know why Lana and Lily decided to go this specific route instead of letting this breathe a little bit more. It in today's climate, this would not have happened, right? Because nowadays you
Right.
want to build a franchise that's going to have 13 installments like the MCU or the
Yeah.
Fast and Furious franchise, right? So you want to leave that war for Zion a real long time. We'll get to it in
Yeah.
10 years, right?
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. Yeah.
like 4 years in, Thanos shows up, and it's not until 6 more years that actually 7 more years that it gets buttoned up, right? um
Right.
and I think
Oh
that
my
that like
gosh.
that's kind of how we look at it now.
Yeah.
But back then it was like, what do? Well, Star Wars is a trilogy, and that's really the best example. Like really think about 2003. What other series of films isn't diminishing returns, right? Every other franchise of films that goes on past 3 is like a horror franchise, and eventually they're direct to video, right? And so you don't want to be that.
Yeah,
You
that's
want to be
true.
the
That's
tight
true. That's true.
trilogy. You want to have 3
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
And so I think that we were kind of, actually I tweeted earlier today, just seeing people react to certain things about certain, this movie, watching this movie was a part of it, but is like other stuff as well. People getting mad at movies that aren't the MCU or Star Wars or Fast and the Furious for being what they are, right? Or when
Right.
one of those types of movies dares to be something other than a 3-act structure, which, like, the only reason that the 3-act structure has proliferated in the way that it has is because of commercials on television, right? So the half-hour sitcom, break it into a 3-act structure because we're going to have 2 commercial
Oh,
breaks. The
right.
44-minute, hour-long episode, break it into 3 acts because we got double that, right? Like we can easily break the acts with commercial breaks. Um and so the 3-act structure has all of a sudden become the way that people are used to experiencing stories. So it's like if all you ever had was spaghetti with meat sauce, and then all of a sudden one day somebody's like, here, try this Alfredo, and you're like, whoa, 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 you can't do that to pasta, right? Like that's against the rules. It's got to be meat sauce. It's like, and I think that most people aren't, um when I say literate, it's gonna sound pretentious, but I don't mean literate in the sense of like they can read. I understand that most people can read words. I mean literate in the sense of like well read, right? That like the thing that people say on Twitter all the time is, for the love of God, I'm begging you, please watch something other than a Marvel movie. Which, like, coming from me, you guys know, everybody within the sound of my voice knows, I absolutely love them. Right? They are like they keep me alive at this point in time, with everything else horrible in the world. If we didn't have Marvel movies, which we didn't for like a year and a half, and it really sucked. I hated it. It was not fun. I in the absence of that. That said, I think I can appreciate Marvel movies more because every once in a while I go and I watch something that's not a Marvel movie. Like I watched The Green Knight,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, go watch something that makes you uncomfortable and challenges you. Not everything should fit into the mold. Not everything needs to be the monomyth. It doesn't need to be Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right? Yes, that works for Star Wars. Yes, that works for Spider-Man. Yes, that works for a bunch of things. It's a great way to tell a story. I don't have anything against it, but also that's not what Shakespeare did. There's no hero's journey in most of Shakespeare's stuff. As a matter of fact, most of his stuff is quite the opposite of a hero's journey, where by the end of it, no one learns anything and everybody's dead. Right? We as the
Well,
audience learned a lot, but like but for the if what you're looking for is a character arc, like, does Hamlet have a character arc? I don't know that he does. He does a bunch of stuff, but it's all
I
like,
I feel like the one that would fit the most into the monomyth narrative is maybe Hamlet, actually,
you
because
think
now
so?
because but in like a really backwards, in a like how you miss the purpose of each of your steps in the journey.
Well,
But
okay, so I get where you're going with that, and that's where I always go, like I would love it if somebody would write Fortinbras as like a as like a counter story to Hamlet, because the whole purpose of Fortinbras in the story is that Hamlet keeps looking over at this other guy who is his mirror, and it's like, that guy is a hero. That guy is doing the thing that I'm supposed to do. Why can't I be like him? I'm useless. And then he's talking about, should
but
he just die? And then at the end he
so
just
I just
dies. So it's like, I don't think that Hamlet has an arc, and I don't think that characters need to have arcs in order for stories to be good and worthwhile, right? Because I like the whole point
well,
of Hamlet
I
is at
mean,
the end Horatio is like, well, this was stupid. Right? Like,
yeah,
for him to stand and look at the
but
audience and go,
you have to
that
know.
was so ridiculous.
But you have to. So I'm gonna. We're this is great. I love that this podcast has gotten us here, because really it's a great opportunity to sort of deconstruct storytelling, and the
Yeah.
idea that I think what the way that you're talking about, like film literacy, or just like the ability of like understanding that there are different tastes for different palettes, and that just because you like to consume one thing doesn't
Yeah.
mean that like you're not able to appreciate other structures or other storytelling. um but liking Spider-Man movies doesn't diminish our ability to like other things, but
Hmm.
we do need to be critical about our own expectations about film. Now, there are, aside from the act structures, the reason why 3 acts or 5 acts work really well is because they do the idea of like a climax, right? That there needs to be
Yeah.
climax and denouement, right? Like how you actually hit that does need to be in some way worked towards. And so when you have, I don't know, and it's like even in acting, right? Like I mean, if you subscribe to the standard like Stanislavskian sort of like super objective and all of that stuff, the idea of like acting theory works really well for story as well. Like you have an overarching, like, what is your like what is the purpose of this story? Like what is it?
Hmm.
Every author has a purpose for telling their story, and within that you have all the little beats that get you there, right? And all of those little
Yeah.
tales and all of those little sections should in theory lead you on a journey so that you end understanding why things happened the way that they did to reach that ultimate conclusion. And so for me, I know that like within the larger conversation I might be like missing that part of the conversation, but bringing it back to the Matrix, I think that for me, I don't quite understand. Like, I do think that there is a missing piece in this Matrix trilogy. And for me, that is, what are we supposed to understand or care about? And I
Yeah.
think that, like, in talking to you, you did ping on something in the final battle between Anderson and the guy that says Mr. Anderson.
Agent Smith.
Can never
Yeah.
Smith. It's just the most generic name. I don't know why I keep missing. Anyways, but he says, he's like, this is a pointless fight. Why are you continuing to fight? Like what is going on? And then Neo being like, I choose to, like, because I choose to.
Yeah.
I get it, but also I don't care. Like, it's not strong enough for me. I don't like
Yeah.
that. For me, is I'm like, is that the point? But maybe that is the point of these movies, is that nothing matters except for the fact that we get to continue to make choices. And if you do sort of reach down very biblical, as everything sort of tends to do, and as somebody who's not religious, what I've extrapolated from the Bible, and excuse me for this gross misinterpretation or deconstructed interpretation, but is like, at its core, that's the point of humanity. Choice. Like, we were given a choice, and that is what made the angels jealous. It's what made Lucifer jealous. It's what the fall was, because they didn't have the choice. And that human beings, it is what makes us and differentiates us from the divine, is that we get given all of the grace and we get this world, but what we choose to do with it, whether it is preordained or not, that is the difference. And so maybe that's the point, but I only got it from that one fight. And it's like, if that's the point, that it really is about choices, because that's what they keep talking about all the time, right? Throughout the second and third one, at least for sure, that there is something sort of really beautiful in that, but I also didn't see it. Yeah. I didn't get it. Like, the conclusion of it never really made its way to, right? And it's like, what do we believe in? Or they're the one that believes in miracles. I can't do anything else. Or we're going to hold it because, right? Like, it all sort of is a little disjointed to me, but I can feel the kernel. But if you can't bring the story together for me so that I can see where you came from and where you went, that to me is missing. I don't care how you get there. I don't care what kind of structure you use. But to me, that's the thing that I'm missing in this third movie.
Yeah. I think I know.
Therefore, hating the second one.
I think I know where your disconnect is.
Okay.
And
excellent.
And I do think that it does boil down to that romantic core of all three of these movies, and I would stake my reputation on the fourth one as well, based on everything that we know about it at the moment. Choice is not the point. Choice is the outcome of what all three of these movies, what these stories are actually about. And there's all this window dressing, and I think that people get caught up in the window dressing of the philosophy and the simulacra arguments and the kung fu and the action sequences and the giant mechs and the spider robots and the squids and all of this stuff. That stuff is like I think the thing for me on this viewing that is the most important takeaway that I can hopefully pass on to other people is that none of that matters. It doesn't matter. And everybody wants to like slam their head against this story and try and get that stuff to make sense at every turn. Like, why is the Merovingian the Merovingian? It doesn't matter. He is. Right? He's made choices that
Okay.
lead him to
Yeah.
where he is. I mean, like, why is the Merovingian the character that he is in this story? Because he's Hades. Because he's the devil. I mean, literally, Neo dies at the end of the second movie, and he ends up on the river Styx, and Trinity needs to make a deal with the ferryman, with
Oh
Charon or
yeah.
whatever, in order to bring
Yeah.
him back. And who does Charon work for? Who gets the coins? Because the
Wow.
Greek thing, you put the coins on the eyes,
I
right, to pay.
missed that. My goodness.
Bingo, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
that
you
this is
have to
my
make
thing, is that, like, this
wow.
is the stuff that I've been
Yeah.
watching for, is trying to discern, like, why is that mythology being overlaid on top of this cyberpunk neo-futurist aesthetic? Why are these things being brought together? What is that story about? What's that myth about?
Mhm.
Well, that's, I mean, and I'm not the best person to talk about a lot of this stuff, because I don't have the encyclopedic knowledge of it. I can't remember who it is that, like, that goes in to get their lover out of, like, makes the deal with
Oh,
Hades.
Orpheus.
There you go, Orpheus.
Orpheus.
Yeah, so, like, that's what
I
that
love this
story
stuff.
is, right? Is
I
that,
love
like,
this.
Trinity, like, literally, but in the twist of this, like, she refuses to pay the price, right?
Yeah, she
And
refuses, but yeah, huh.
you know
Huh.
which ultimately I think is what comes back to bite them at the end, is, like, she refuses to pay the price and she ends up dead by the end of the story, right? And, like, there's a reason why she doesn't. There's also, like the the Merovingian says, like, hey, I'll tell you what you can get me. I want the eyes of the oracle, something that can't be taken but has to be given, right? And they
Yeah.
say no. They say no. Trinity specifically says, we will not do that, which, like, was a whole other storyline, a whole other path. And this is the whole thing about choice. Her love propels her down a path of choice that actually ends up, what a weird thing that later on in this movie, Neo's eyes are burnt off of his face.
Huh.
Like
Huh.
there's all of this stuff is going on, all of it, every single one of these allegories and mythologies, and, like, this stuff that's being overlaid on top of this story, every single important piece of that points back to one thing, and that's love. And one of the things that this movie does that the last two didn't is that it further defines love in the scene in the train station with Sati's father and mother, right? I'm
Yeah.
trying to can't remember the character's name, but when he's explaining, is it
The love
Ramakandra,
is fulfilled.
the father is explaining love. What is love? Like, I didn't realize that programs could love. It's like, love is a word, not an emotion. It's a word to express a connection.
Right.
And that also feeds back into the relationship between Niobe and Morpheus, and why Niobe is willing to go to the lengths that she's willing to go because of her connection to Morpheus. And Morpheus has this belief, and it transfers over to her because of their connection. And she makes a lot of decisions, she makes a lot of choices in this story, and this is why Niobe is in the story. She makes these choices that are motivated by one thing, and that's love. She loves Morpheus. Morpheus loves Neo. Neo needs to be
Mm.
protected. Niobe's going to do whatever it takes in order to do that. The Oracle tells her not what to do, but what's going to happen. You are going. All the
Right.
Oracle ever does
Yeah.
is point out the forks in the road to these guys, right?
Right.
Prepares them for it, tells them what they needed to hear, right? You're going to get to
Yeah.
a point at some point soon where you're going to be asked if you're going to help Neo or not. You're going to have to choose. And all of the choices that put us on the path towards peace are the choices that seem illogical. They don't make any sense. That's why Locke exists in the story, because Locke doesn't make choices out of love. Locke makes choices out of logic and reason. He acts like a machine, right?
Hey,
And we see
is
him
he
as an
based on the
antagonist,
Locke the
like
but is Locke,
mythologically Locke.
which one, Locke, like Locke, Hobbes, and Rousseau? No, I'm thinking like
No,
lower, like philosophical,
yeah,
philosophically, which one Locke was, if Locke was the one that was the believer or
that's
not.
like logic and reason.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah. Like, but
I
that's
don't
his purpose in the story, right? Is to be this counterpoint, and we see him as an antagonist for the most part, even
right,
though his
yeah,
goal is the same as our goal, which is to protect Zion, right?
yeah,
But he
hmm
believes that protecting Zion means destroying the machines. But the counselor, the counselor Haman, I think is the guy's name, the old man, right? That we talked about on the
yeah,
last
yeah, yeah,
episode.
yeah,
if if the real is also the inside the matrix, if it's just another layer of the matrix, I believe that he's a program as well. I think that he's actually part of the machines, and he's there to serve a purpose,
right,
just like the Oracle is inside the matrix to serve a purpose, and he puts Neo on a path, right? He clues Neo. The reason why I think he's a program is because he definitely like goes out of his way to teach Neo some lessons for things that Neo is going to have to confront later on in the story. And he also
mhm,
is the one who's constantly like, let's give him a chance. Let's give him a chance. I think Morpheus might be onto something, right? He's like a man of faith in a way, to me, it's like
right.
it's counter to a lot of other characters in
What's
Zion, and
what's
well, like
his
what's the
name?
reason for
What's
that?
his name again? What was his name
Counselor
again?
Haman, I think, is that character. I'm looking at
Mon.
it
Okay.
on IMDb.
Anyways, I will say Locke the philosopher, because I need to know these ones better.
Yeah,
But he basically is maintained, like he was the tabula rasa guy.
yeah,
And so he maintained that we're born without innate ideas, and that knowledge is instead determined only by experience derived from sense perception, a concept known as empiricism. So it totally checks out that
yeah,
character is based on the ideology around social contract theory and like Lockean, like liberalism, like the
yeah,
idea that like you have to believe, like see stuff to believe it, and
yeah,
that he is going to be very sense based, and it's like this is what is happening now, and if you want to go with somebody else you have to like not be me. That totally checks out. Oh,
yeah.
there's so much mythology in these
It's
these
it
stories. Wow.
And that's why I'm maintaining this, and that's why I'm gonna fight this fight now, because I used to be one of the people who was like, oh yeah, those second and third Matrix movies sure are pieces of garbage. And it's like I just wasn't there. I just wasn't ready to receive the story as it's being presented, because like it all, like I said, everything is going back to this support of the idea. There are way too many of these things that I'm talking about, that the mythology and the philosophy and stuff like that, that all points back to the fact that like we should be motivated out of love. If we want peace, we should do things out of love and not out of logic or reason, or because we think it's the best thing, right? That's how a machine works. And we can even the machines are better than that in this story, right? Like even the programs have the capacity for love. And if they do, then peace is a possibility, because if they can understand love and we can understand love and everybody can work together, then we can have peace. And that's where you end up at the end of this story, right? Um
Right.
yeah, it's way too much of a coincidence for any of that to be a mistake. It's just it's tough. It's a there's a hard outer shell on this story. It's a nut that has to be cracked, and most people going to the movies, certainly people who reacted viscerally to the first movie, that's not what they signed up for. They wanted more kung fu, they wanted more cool practical special effects. And instead what they got was a movie that's trying to challenge them philosophically while peppering in. It's almost like they didn't really understand, like the Wachowskis really didn't understand exactly what they had tapped into when they made the first movie. It's almost like divine inspiration sort of put them on the path. And then in the second and third movie they were trying to bottle that lightning, and they just couldn't. They just couldn't. But like it's like the work is there,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I can't deny that the magic is maybe not there for everybody, that because not everybody wants to do that. I do, right? Like I
I mean, yeah.
especially right
Yeah.
now, like I wanted this, I wanted to do this homework, I wanted to look at
Mhm.
this and go like, what's going on, I need to understand this. I wanted to treat it like a puzzle that could be solved, and I feel really satisfied sitting here tonight talking to you, going like, hey, I think I get these movies. I think I understand what the motivation is here. I'm really excited for what this next one is going to be. And I might
Right.
be setting myself up for disappointment because maybe it's not, right? Maybe I'm on the wrong track. Maybe I've
But we
misinterpreted
can
this
still
stuff, but
enjoy we can
yeah.
still enjoy the previous films, and I think all it's said and done, there's the difference between, right, the intention and what you actually get out of it. And so there are some like being able to couch the mythos in these radical fight sequences in the second and the first one that hit so
Mm-hmm.
well, and then what it is that's missing in the third one. I do feel like like tonally the third one is just a different type of movie,
Yep.
because it totally focuses on this real world machine based, like, sort of gritty world. And I don't know, and it requires a different kind of understanding about these characters because they don't get to be as epic, and you really are trying to deal with them.
Yeah.
Hey, okay, but you have to explain to me how they do not have an EMP in the main area. How is that a thing? I don't. What a silly oversight. They didn't even explain it away. Did they explain it away in
Oh,
any of
they
the other ones
did.
why
They
they didn't
absolutely do.
have an
Yeah.
EMP?
When Locke comes out and he's mad and they're like, "We did it," and he's like, "You did? Yeah, you guys did it, all right. You just
Yeah, but it's
opened
like,
the front door. Like if I were the machines, I'd be rallying every single one of my forces to come and
no,
obliterate
but
us
they
right
don't
now."
explain why there's no EMP.
That's why. Why would you use an EMP on the dock? Why would you have that at the gate if it's going to disable everything?
Oh. Oh,
The
okay.
EMP the EMP doesn't care
Okay.
that
Fine.
they're
Yeah, one of the
shielded.
things are good and one of
They
the
would
other ones aren't. Yeah.
yes, it's all made up, right? It's all made up.
Yes,
So you could
of
say
course.
like, "Oh, well, the dock is shielded from EMPs, so yay." But that's the whole point in the previous movie of like, we've got all the ships and we're going to ambush them in the tunnels before they can get to the dock. We're going to hit them
Right.
before they get in range so that the EMPs don't take out our last line of defense.
Gotcha.
Right? That's why like we're going to
Wait,
meet
what?
them on the beach so that they can't get into the city, right?
Right. Why
Like
were there
that's
only
the
the
whole
three
point.
ships left? Did the rest of the ships
Sorry?
get destroyed? Why were there
Yeah,
only three ships?
Bane did that in the last movie, at the end of the last movie.
Oh, all of the ships got destroyed by Bane.
He set off the
Oh.
EMP before the
Oh.
machines got there. So the machines
Gotcha. And so
showed
that's
up,
why
they
all the
hadn't been
yeah.
disabled, and they just killed everybody. Right? That was the only ships that one ship made
Okay.
it out, which is the hammer, the one that we end up on in this
Right.
movie, right?
Yeah.
They like eked it
With
out because
Bane.
they were
With
out of
Bane, yeah.
range of the EMP that Bane set off,
Right.
right? Everybody else got
Right.
killed.
Okay.
They made it
I get
out
it. I get it. I get
just
it.
by
Okay.
luck or providence, depending on your opinion
Yeah.
of the way that the story plays out. And then
Yeah.
the Nebuchadnezzar, which got destroyed soon after that, and then the Logos, right?
Mhm.
So those were the only three ships that survived that because the Nebuchadnezzar and the Logos were in the Matrix, right? They were in the tunnels to jack into the Matrix, off on their mission to stand by for the Oracle, right?
Gotcha.
So that's why we only end up with three ships.
Got it. That makes sense. Cool. I do like being able to talk about all of this stuff. It does make sense.
Yeah,
a little bit more.
I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything because I don't care. It doesn't take anything away from me. If other people want to tell me that I'm wrong and that these movies still suck, fine. I don't know why you try and take joy away from me, but if that's your prerogative, then go for it. Um, but yeah, like for me, it's like I can now look at these movies and go, oh dang, like there's something more here. It doesn't mean that I want to watch them again right now. I don't. I have no interest in watching them again
Yeah.
anytime soon. Even the first movie, right? I'm excited for the new one, which I will probably watch and then want to watch again when it comes out on digital or whatever. But I just that's just by virtue of the fact that it'll be new and exciting. Um, but I do like I do, like I said, I have like a sense of accomplishment now of like, ha, you know, especially there is a little bit of an elitist aspect to that of like, not, I don't know if it's elitist, but because it's not really like, I don't think that I'm better than other people by virtue of this. I just feel like I have managed to um unlock something that other people haven't been able to unlock for themselves, and that just makes me happy that I'm like, oh cool, like I did it. Like I said, like I was looking at this as like a puzzle that needed to be solved, and not everybody wants to do a puzzle, and that's fine, right? If you just want movies that you can escape into and you don't have to do this much work in order to enjoy, I understand that. I understand, and sometimes that's what I'm in the mood for. But I absolutely found joy in decoding this story and finding the mythology and getting deeper into that stuff. But that's what I've been doing over the pandemic, right? Like that's been the thing that I think, between that and drawing, those are like the skills that I have leveled up the most. Is like, oh, I'm by just through listening to What the Force, which is one of my favorite podcasts, listening to Marie Claire talk about mythology and Star Wars and all that sort of stuff, and Ty on Wit and Folly, which is a YouTube channel, like, and getting into that stuff and going, okay, like I want to understand more. That started with the Campbellian stuff, but then it's like evolved into more of like, oh, like but there's other stuff that like Campbell boiled down a lot of concepts, but he did the work. It's the Jurassic Park quote, right, where Ian Malcolm's like, you saw what other scientists had done and you took the next step, like you're standing on the shoulders of geniuses, and like you, like a kid who's found his dad's gun. And I think that's why that 3-act structure thing that I'm talking about, like, kind of, it ruffles my feathers a little bit, because Joseph Campbell did the work, and then he made it easily digestible and put it into this circle with these definitions that can be broken down very easily and very quickly. And that's great because it makes it a more effective communication tool for telling that type of story. It's also made telling that type of, like, using that template for storytelling lazy, right? Which, when the second that a
Okay.
storytelling
Yeah.
trope becomes lazy, it becomes hack, right? So that's kind of where I'm at, which is why I like it. You either have to do it and make it sing like Star Wars or Community, because Dan Harmon is a student of this stuff. But in order to do that, you got to study the stuff that Joseph Campbell studied, right? In order to make a good Star Wars, you can't just watch Star Wars. You have to go watch Kurosawa. You got to go watch some old westerns. You got to go watch some World War II movies. You have to go back to the sources that George Lucas was going to, that inspired him to tell those stories. And that's why some of these Star Wars stories work and some of them don't. Because some of these storytellers are going back to the source and learning the lessons that George Lucas learned that he put into his storytelling. Joseph Campbell is a part of that. And George Lucas did that homework. He read what Joseph Campbell was writing, and then he took the next step and he went further back, like deeper into the rabbit hole, and he read the other stuff, right? And that's where I'm at right now, I think, is like, and I'm not going to read Joseph Campbell because I don't have the time for that sort of thing, and I'm also not professionally telling stories. in that way. Marketing is storytelling, but I don't need to have that much power over people's purchasing decisions. It's probably not a good idea. But I'm kind of skipping over some of this stuff, but I'm not writing screenplays, so I don't need to care that much. I'm just talking about stuff on podcasts, much less responsible. I but like that's what I've been doing over the last 2 years, is getting really deep into this stuff to understand, not just, from a performance standpoint why I like Iron Man, but like what is it in the character of Tony Stark that resonates with me as a person versus another character in the MCU. Like, I mean, like I like Captain America, but why do I like Captain America? But I feel like I am Tony Stark, right? Like, why do I sit in a Spider-Man
Right.
movie and go, I can't say this because it's a spoiler. Never mind. I was gonna say something. I'll save it for next week.
Good on you.
Um,
Yeah.
I caught myself right there at the last second, but
Nice.
I had a moment in the recent Spider-Man movie where I very very much related to a Spider-Man moment, and was like, yeah, this is one of the reasons why I like this character, right? It's and we know that it's Spider-Man's an everyman. That one's easy. That one's a gimme. But Tony Stark, it's like he's this very unlikable character in a certain way, but and yet he's also very likable. We also root for him and we want him to succeed. And what is that, right? And so I'm trying to get to that level with understanding the media that I consume, so that I can do two things: not be overly motivated, affected by it, like as in terms of like it making decisions for me in the way that I live my life, and also like I want more. I want more of the things that I like, and the best
Good.
way to find that, it's like if you go to a restaurant and you try something and you're like, oh man, what's that? Like what made this hamburger better than that other hamburger? And you find out, oh well, this is actually a mix of like 50-50 sirloin and chuck. And you're like, okay, well then I'm gonna try and make a hamburger with 50-50 sirloin and chuck beef instead of just all chuck beef, right? I know you have no idea what I'm talking about, Amanda.
I
Other
don't,
people
but I
understand
love
this
that you
analogy.
love it. Yeah, there you go.
Other people understand it. It's a very relatable analogy. But
Great.
yeah,
Okay.
it's
Cool.
the same sort of thing of I know that I love Iron Man, but why do I love Iron Man? Why do I love Iron Man and Peter Venkman from the Ghostbusters when both of them are jerks? And then also like I can be a jerk sometimes. And why do I like that about myself? Am I trying to just justify that it's okay to be a jerk and that's why I like these characters? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know.
I can't. I mean, I don't know either.
That's it.
Seems like a good place
Yeah.
to wrap it up in the
I
uncertainty.
I think that everybody should give The Matrix another chance. I hope that everybody has, that's been listening to this, and or maybe not just The Matrix, but just like stuff that other people. Some people really love this franchise and were never dissuaded. And I think when that happens, there is something there. And not to say that everybody else is wrong, but just like maybe everybody else overlooked something that was actually quite good. In the end, maybe just the execution was slightly off, which is what I would say about these two movies. Because when people complain about them, I understand the complaints. I absolutely do, and I think that people are justified in those complaints. I just also think this will be my final thought. I think that we hold this stuff to too high of a standard sometimes, and we forget that movie makers and storytellers are human beings as well, and also that like perfection is not the point. Every once in a while we'll get a story that like hits on all levels, and it squeaks through and it manages, in spite of every disadvantage levied at it by the process of collaborative storytelling, to be perfect, like the first Matrix movie was, like the original Star Wars movies are. I mean, like Iron Man is, like a lot of the movies in the MCU tend to be, and have been. Every once in a while we get it. They squeak through. They're the exception, not the rule. And it's okay for a story to be good and not the best and perfect and without fault, right? Like it's okay. It's it's the same thing that where when people go like, when somebody tries to be super clever about their movie going experience and be like, did you know that if Indiana Jones wasn't in the movie Indiana Jones, it would have played out exactly the same way? And it's like you're trying so hard to be clever that you've completely missed the point of the movie. Right? Like, because that's not, whether or not Indiana Jones saved the day is not the point of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, that's not if that's your, like, your some total takeaway from watching Raiders of the Lost Ark, you messed up somewhere along the way. Because there's a lot more to that movie that's important that has nothing to do with whether or not Indy wins or loses. As a matter of fact, the fact that he loses most of the time is one of the things that's great about those movies. And it's one of the lessons to take away from Indiana Jones is get knocked down, get back up, keep going, right? Like, that's that character. That's why we love Indy, because he gets punched in the face and he's fighting a guy twice his size who breaks a brick over his head, and he shakes it off and he gets the job done. And we all wish that we could be that resilient, right? So whether or not his involvement is in, it's just like, yeah, just don't defeat the purpose of movie going by trying to be smarter than the movie that you're watching, right? Trying to going like, I saw that twist coming. Good, cool. Maybe the director wanted you to see it coming.
Yeah.
Good stories actually telegraph the twist about 5 minutes before they happen, right? To let the audience in on it before the characters find out. So that when that happens, you're like, sorry?
Sometimes you're my sister and you shout out 5 nonsense things at the beginning of the movie, and 1 out of the 5 turned out to be true, but the other ones you still double down on, and you're like, stop it. Stop it. Immediately. I just watched Frozen 2 with her. She hadn't seen it before.
Yeah.
It was really funny. And she kept saying stuff, and I was like, do you want me to answer you right now? Like, are you actually wanting me to respond to, because I've seen this before. I could tell you whether or not you are correct. Anyways. So, but yes, don't try to, it's a way. It's a way of watching something.
The counter argument to what I'm saying is that whatever makes you happy, like if you like being that guy, and I'm gonna use a gendered term because I do think it's mostly guys who do this. But if you want to be that guy, that needs to be smarter than the movie, then good for you. I don't want to go to the movies with you. That's not why I'm there. That's not why I'm there. I'm there. Sometimes I'm there for the thrill ride. Sometimes I'm there to decode a puzzle, right?
There you go. Yeah.
Watch all types of movies.
Likes to watch movies with her, so it's good. Yes. Yeah. All types. Cool. Figure out. It's good.
We did it. That's an episode.
Nothing more to add. You know what I do want to point out there? This is my plug for a movie to get excited for and hyped in the new year, is Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. I think actually it's going to open South by Southwest Film Festival or something like that. It seems like a rad film. And apparently, so I wasn't familiar with the Daniels, who are apparently the like filmmakers behind the film, also did the movie that Daniel Radcliffe was a corpse. And I just like tonally love that idea. So anyways, I haven't seen that movie because it's probably not my jam, but I like the essence of it. The like, I like it in theory. So
yeah,
that's my last thought on this. Is like, speaking of, there's so much content in the world, and you can find everything for everyone. And I'm just excited by the possibilities. So
I'm just gonna tag onto that. Daniel Radcliffe makes the best choices.
He really does.
For someone who just like
oh, so good.
Yeah, The Sandra Bullock
Yeah, the Sandra Bullock movie, and
and Channing Tatum.
Yeah. It's just
Yeah.
his
It's
cameo too on Extras was so great. Like, I
he
don't know.
the way that he has maneuvered his career, that
Mhm.
knowing that he never has to work another day in his life because he's Harry Potter. That he has the freedom to make choices. So let's make sure that those choices are always interesting. Which, like,
Yeah.
is every movie that he's ever made good? No. But is every choice that he's ever made for like the next role that he's gonna take interesting? Yeah. He's gonna play a villain in a romantic comedy that's also like an Indiana Jones style adventure movie, with
Yeah. So
Sandra
good.
Bullock, Channing Tatum, and Brad Pitt. Like, like, like,
So excited.
I'm gonna say that again. Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter, is the villain in a movie that's coming up that is a romantic comedy adventure film starring Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum, and Brad Pitt is a supporting character in this film.
I love
All
it. I
right,
love it. It makes me
wrap your
happy.
melons around that and think about it and realize there's no way that movie's not going to be entertaining. Is it going to be good? I don't know. That's yet to be seen. It could be bad. It could be very bad. Still going to be fun to watch. It's still going to be fun to watch.
Yep.
Just by virtue of all of
Yep.
those people, all of those chess pieces in those positions makes for an interesting game. And I'm there for it. I don't remember what it's called, but yeah, I'm
Yeah, I can't
definitely
remember
down.
what it's called either, but
I don't know.
feel like
It doesn't matter
it's
because that's how everybody's going to talk about it. It's, hey, did you see that movie
yeah.
with Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum where she's the romance writer and he's the cover model for her romance books, and then they have to go find a lost
Is that the
city or something?
conceit? Oh, it's
Yeah.
called Lost City. But
Oh,
isn't that what it is? The Lost City or
bingo.
something?
Yeah, the
I
lost
feel like
city.
it's called Lost
Yeah,
City.
that's what it is.
I feel like that makes sense.
We did it. We got
So
there.
yes,
We
that
got
is how
there.
there you go. Figured
Yeah.
it out. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. What a great note to end on. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back next week with our Nuff Said Spider-Man No Way Home, which means you got a week. You got a week to go
That's
watch that
plenty.
movie.
That's very generous. Very generous.
I say go
Do
see
it.
it
Why are you
twice
waiting?
and then go
Yeah.
see The Matrix. But make sure that when you do all of these things, that you are doing it in a safe way and that you are not helping Omicron spread and make people sick. Stay home if you're sick. If you feel sick, they're just movies.
Yeah.
You'll be able to watch them
That's
in other
true.
ways
Yeah.
eventually at some
Yeah.
point
Yeah.
soon.
Stay safe.
If you're in the
Yeah.
States, you can watch The Matrix on HBO Max. And
Ooh.
I'm gonna be honest, like I want to see this on the big screen for sure. But if I could watch it at home,
I would
maybe
definitely.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
haven't even. I guess I haven't. I'm a liar. Maybe I'm being a hypocrite because I haven't even looked to see if it's going to be on Crave. I
I
don't
was
think
gonna
it
say
is.
it might actually. I'm like, is it coming out? Because maybe I could just watch it at home. Anyways, I've got it. My decision this week is: do I go see The Matrix or rewatch Spider-Man No Way Home? So. We'll
yeah, I mean, like
I
would
also
say
the holidays, so maybe I should spend time with my family and not like.
Oh,
Maybe
I was going the opposite direction with that. It's the holidays. Maybe just watch both.
That's fair. I do like that idea as well.
Awesome. We'll keep going if we don't stop. So again, thank you guys for listening. And we'll see you next week for Enough Said. And then we'll be back in 2 weeks where we don't have a topic predetermined. You don't have any movies that you got to go watch in it. I mean, I guess go watch The Matrix Resurrections. We're going to talk about it. But yeah. Cool. Thanks for listening.
Stay safe, everybody. Wash your hands and be kind to one another.
Follow the Thunderquack Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by searching the Thunderquack Podcast. You can support us in 3 ways. First, by heading to the podcast service of your choice and leaving a rating and review. Second, by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merch from your favorite podcasts. And last but not least, by heading to patreon.com/thunderquack to kick in with your monthly pledge of support and get cool rewards like early access and extended episodes. The Thunderquack Podcast is the official podcast of thunderquack.com. Head to thunderquack.com to discover more great podcasts.